The morning sun cast long shadows across the classified briefing room at Naval Special Warfare Command in Virginia Beach. Commander Jake Razor Morrison sat at the head of the polished conference table, his weathered hands wrapped around a steaming cup of black coffee. 20 years of special operations had carved deep lines around his steel-gray eyes, and his reputation among Navy SEALs was legendary. He'd led successful missions in Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, and half a dozen other countries that didn't officially exist on any operation reports. Today's briefing was different. Today, they were bringing in an outsider. The door opened with a soft click, and Captain Sarah Chen stepped into the room. At 28 years old, she moved with the quiet confidence of someone who had nothing to prove and everything to lose. Her black hair was pulled back in a regulation bun, and her Army uniform displayed an impressive array of ribbons that most people wouldn't recognize, but meant everything to those who did. Expert marksman badges, combat deployment patches, and a small silver star that indicated she'd been places and done things that required serious clearance to discuss. "Commander Morrison," she said, extending her hand with a firm grip that matched his own. "Captain Chen," he replied, studying her with the calculating gaze that had kept him alive through countless operations. "I've read your file. Army Special Forces, 2 tours in Syria, 3 in Afghanistan, sniper qualification with the highest scores in your class." He paused, letting his skepticism show. "But this isn't the same as what we do here." Sarah took a seat across from him, unfazed by his tone. She'd heard variations of this speech before, from drill sergeants who thought women couldn't handle combat to special forces, instructors who believed sniping was a man's job. Actions always spoke louder than words, and she'd let her rifle do the talking when the time came. "Sir, I understand your concerns," she said calmly, "but my record speaks for itself." Morrison pulled out a thick folder and spread several photographs across the table. The images showed a mountainous region with rocky outcroppings and sparse vegetation. Red circles marked specific locations, and distance measurements were written in precise military notation. "Operation Thunderstrike," he began, his voice taking on the tone of a man who'd briefed countless dangerous missions. "Intelligence indicates that 3 high-value targets will be meeting in a remote compound in the mountains of an unnamed country. These aren't just ordinary terrorists or militia leaders. General Ahmad Hassan controls the largest weapons trafficking network in the region. General Viktor Petrov has been selling Russian military secrets to the highest bidder. General Maria Santos commands a mercenary army that's been destabilizing governments across South America." He pointed to a satellite image that showed a compound nestled in a valley between 2 steep mountain ridges. "They're meeting to coordinate a massive arms deal that could shift the balance of power in 3 different regions. Our job is to make sure that meeting never happens." Sarah studied the photographs with professional interest. The compound was well defended, with multiple guard towers and clear fields of fire. But what caught her attention was the distance measurements written on the images. "Sir, these ranges are extreme," she observed. "The closest concealment position is nearly 1,800 meters from the compound. That's over a mile." Morrison's expression hardened. "Exactly why I have concerns about this mission. My boys can handle close-quarters combat, explosive breaches, and direct action. But this kind of precision shooting at this distance, in these conditions—" He shook his head. "No one can hit that." The room fell silent except for the quiet hum of the air conditioning. Sarah had heard those words before in different contexts and from different people, but they always carried the same weight of doubt and dismissal. Lieutenant Commander Rick Ghost Patterson, Morrison's second-in-command, leaned forward. "With respect, sir, maybe we should consider adjusting the mission parameters. Get closer, use a different approach." "Negative," Morrison replied firmly. "The terrain doesn't allow for closer approach without compromising the entire operation. The target will be in that location for exactly 47 minutes during their meeting. After that, they disappear back into the wind, and we lose our only chance to stop this arms deal." Sarah remained quiet, processing the tactical situation. 1,800 meters wasn't impossible, but it would require perfect conditions, flawless equipment, and a shooter who understood both the science and art of extreme-range precision shooting. Wind speed, temperature, humidity, barometric pressure, even the Earth's rotation would factor into the shot placement. "Captain Chen," Morrison said, his tone suggesting he was about to deliver bad news. "I appreciate that Army Special Forces sent their best, but this mission requires capabilities that, frankly, I'm not sure exist. We're talking about 3 separate targets, in different locations within the compound, all requiring elimination within a matter of minutes." "Sir, may I ask what the fallback plan is if the sniper mission fails?" Sarah asked. Morrison's jaw tightened. "Direct assault. My team goes in hard and fast, which means higher casualties and lower probability of mission success. These targets have escape routes and contingency plans. If we don't take them out silently and simultaneously, the entire operation becomes a firefight with uncertain outcomes." The weight of responsibility settled on Sarah's shoulders like a familiar burden. She'd carried it before, in the mountains of Afghanistan, where a single missed shot could mean the difference between her team going home or being shipped back in flag-draped coffins. "Sir, I'd like to study the intelligence reports and conduct a site survey," she said. "If this mission is as critical as you say, then we need to explore every possible option." Morrison stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. "Captain, I've been doing this for 2 decades. I've worked with the best snipers in the military, and I'm telling you that this shot is beyond human capability. The variables are too extreme, the margin for error too small." "Then why am I here, sir?" Sarah asked, meeting his gaze directly. The question hung in the air like a challenge. Morrison had requested the best precision shooter available, and Army Special Forces had sent Captain Sarah Chen. Her file contained details that even impressed hardened Special Operations veterans. Confirmed kills at ranges exceeding 1,500 meters, successful missions in the most hostile environments on Earth, and a reputation for making impossible shots when everything depended on it. "You're here because Washington thinks this mission is worth attempting," Morrison finally said. "But I won't risk my team's lives on what amounts to a prayer and perfect weather conditions." Sarah nodded, understanding the commander's position. He was responsible for the lives of highly trained operators, men who had families and futures beyond their military service. Sending them into a direct assault meant accepting casualties that might be avoidable if the sniper mission succeeded. "Sir, I'd like permission to examine the equipment and conduct some test shots," she said. "Let me show you what's possible before we make any final decisions." Morrison considered this for a moment, then gestured toward the door. "Fine. But understand this, Captain. If you can't prove to me that this mission has a reasonable chance of success, we go with the direct assault plan. I won't gamble with my men's lives on theoretical possibilities." They walked through the facility toward the armory, passing groups of SEALs engaged in various training exercises. Sarah noticed how they watched her with curious but respectful attention. Word had already spread that an Army sniper was being brought in for a special mission. And these were men who understood the value of precision shooting, even if they specialized in different tactics. The armory contained an impressive array of weapons and equipment. Morrison led her to a secured section where the specialized sniper rifles were stored. He pulled out a case containing a custom-built rifle that looked more like a precision scientific instrument than a traditional weapon. "This is what we're working with," he said, opening the case to reveal the rifle. Custom .338 Lapua Magnum, modified for extreme-range shooting, precision optics, adjustable stock, and enough stopping power to complete the mission at distance. Sarah lifted the rifle with practiced hands, feeling its weight and balance. The weapon was beautifully crafted, with every component designed for accuracy. She examined the scope. checking the adjustments and clarity of the optics. "Sir, this is excellent equipment," she said, "but the rifle is only as good as the person behind it and the conditions on the day of the mission." "Exactly my point," Morrison replied. "Too many variables, too many things that can go wrong." They spent the next hour going over the mission details. Intelligence reports indicated that the three generals would arrive at the compound separately and meet in different areas. General Hassan would be in the main building's second-floor balcony. General Petrov would conduct his business in a courtyard area near the center of the compound. General Santos preferred to meet outdoors, near a helicopter landing pad on the compound's eastern edge. The timing was crucial. All three targets would be exposed and vulnerable for exactly 47 minutes, starting at 800 local time. After that, they would complete their business and depart, making them nearly impossible to track or target again. "The shot sequence would have to be perfect," Morrison explained, pointing to the compound layout. "Hassan first, since he's the most visible target and the longest shot. Then Petrov in the courtyard. Finally, Santos near the landing pad. 3 shots, 3 different ranges and angles, all within minutes of each other." Sarah studied the layout, calculating angles and distances in her head. "Sir, what's the wind pattern in that valley typically like at 800? "Variable and unpredictable," Morrison answered. "Morning thermals rising from the valley floor, crosswinds coming through the mountain passes. It's a sniper's nightmare." The more Sarah learned about the mission, the more she understood Morrison's skepticism. This wasn't just about making a long shot. It was about making 3 perfect shots under the worst possible conditions, while knowing that failure meant sending good men into a potentially deadly direct assault. "Sir, I'd like to spend some time on the range with this rifle," she said. "And I'll need detailed weather reports for the target area, including historical data for wind patterns and atmospheric conditions." Morrison nodded reluctantly. "You'll have whatever support you need, Captain. But I want to be clear about something. I respect your reputation and your service record. But if you can't convince me that this mission has better than a 50% chance of success, I'm calling it off and going with the direct approach." As they left the armory, Sarah carried the weight of the mission with her. She'd made difficult shots before, but never with so much riding on the outcome. 3 highly dangerous individuals who needed to be stopped, a team of elite operators whose lives depended on her accuracy, and a commander who doubted whether the mission was even possible. That evening, Sarah stood alone on the firing range as the sun set over the Virginia coastline. The rifle felt familiar in her hands now, after hours of adjustment and familiarization. She'd fired dozens of rounds at various distances, getting a feel for the weapon's characteristics and her own body's rhythm with the unfamiliar equipment. The targets she'd been shooting were standard military silhouettes at ranges from 800 to 1,500 meters. Every shot had found its mark, clustering in tight groups that demonstrated both the rifle's accuracy and her own skill. But she knew that controlled range shooting was vastly different from the real-world conditions she'd face on the actual mission. As darkness settled over the range, Sarah cleaned and secured the rifle, her mind already planning the next day's training. She would push the distance further, work with wind flags and atmospheric monitoring equipment, and practice the rapid target transitions that would be necessary to engage 3 separate individuals in quick succession. Walking back toward the barracks, she thought about Commander Morrison's words. "No one can hit that." She'd heard variations of that challenge throughout her military career, and it had always motivated her to prove that limitations existed only in people's minds, not in reality. Tomorrow would bring more preparation, more questions about the mission's feasibility, and more pressure to prove that the impossible was simply difficult, not insurmountable. The lives of American service members and the security of multiple regions depended on 3 precisely placed shots from over a mile away. Sarah had never missed when it mattered most, and she didn't intend to start now. The next morning arrived with heavy clouds and shifting winds that made the flag outside the range facility dance erratically. Sarah had been awake since 0400, studying weather reports and atmospheric data for both the training location and the target area halfway around the world. The conditions today would actually be good practice for what she might face during the real mission. Commander Morrison arrived at the range at 6:30, accompanied by his team members who had come to watch the demonstration. Lieutenant Commander Patterson stood beside him, along with Chief Petty Officer Mike Bulldog Rodriguez and Petty Officer First Class Tommy Hawk Williams. These were seasoned operators who had seen enough combat to know the difference between range shooting and real-world performance under pressure. "Morning, Captain," Morrison said, his tone neutral but watchful. "Weather Service says we've got variable winds gusting up to 15 knots, with shifting directions. Not exactly ideal shooting conditions." Sarah was already prone behind the rifle, adjusting the scope and checking her equipment. "Sir, ideal conditions don't exist in real operations. Today's weather will give us a better idea of what's actually possible." She had set up a series of targets at extreme distances, ranging from 1,600 meters out to 1,900 meters. Each target represented the approximate size and placement of the 3 generals she would need to engage during the actual mission. The targets weren't standard military silhouettes, but specially designed to match the probable size and positioning of human targets at those extreme ranges. "Captain, before we begin," Morrison said, "I want you to understand something. My team has been together for 3 years. We've completed 18 successful missions without losing a single operator. That record matters to me more than any single operation, no matter how critical the target." Sarah looked up from her scope, meeting the commander's gaze. "Sir, I understand completely. My job is to make sure your team never has to risk themselves on a direct assault." She had spent the previous evening studying not just the ballistic data and mission parameters, but also the personnel files of Morrison's team. These were exceptional operators with families waiting for them at home. Rodriguez had 3 children and a wife who taught elementary school. Williams was engaged to be married next spring. Patterson had just bought his first house. Their lives and futures depended on Sarah's ability to make shots that most people believed were impossible. The first target was set at 1,600 meters, representing the shot on General Hassan. Sarah settled into her shooting position, controlling her breathing and feeling the wind patterns across her face and arms. The rifle rested solidly on its bipod, and she began the careful process of reading the environmental conditions. Wind was the enemy of long-range precision shooting. At 1,600 meters, a 5-mile-per-hour crosswind could push a bullet several feet off target. Today's gusting winds meant she would need to read each shot individually, adjusting for conditions that could change between the time she squeezed the trigger and when the bullet reached its target. "Wind is coming from the northwest at about 12 knots, gusting to 15, she called out, her voice steady and professional. Temperature is 62 degrees, humidity at 78%, barometric pressure steady. Morrison and his team watched silently as Sarah made minute adjustments to her scope. She was calculating bullet drop, wind drift, and the Coriolis effect caused by the Earth's rotation. At these extreme ranges, even factors that seemed insignificant became critical to accuracy. The first shot broke with a sharp crack that echoed across the range. Through the spotting scope, Morrison watched as the bullet struck within inches of the target's center. At 1,600 meters, that level of accuracy was impressive even under controlled conditions. "Good shot," Patterson observed. But that was just one target, in one location, with time to prepare. Sarah was already transitioning to the second target, representing General Petrov's position in the compound's courtyard. This target was set at 1,700 meters and positioned to simulate the different angle and elevation she would face during the real mission. The shot required her to adjust not just for the increased distance, but for the wind patterns that would be different at various points along the bullet's flight path. She took more time with this shot, studying the wind flags positioned at intervals between her position and the target. The morning thermals were beginning to rise from the ground, creating vertical air currents that could affect bullet trajectory. At 1,700 meters, the bullet would be in flight for over 2 seconds, traveling through multiple layers of air with different temperatures and wind patterns. The second shot fired, and again the bullet found its mark with precision that impressed even the skeptical SEAL operators. 2 for 2, Williams said quietly. But the real test is the rapid transitions. In the actual mission, there won't be time to reread conditions between shots. Sarah understood this perfectly. During the mission, the 3 shots would need to be fired within minutes of each other. The sounds of the first shot would alert security forces, and delay would mean mission failure. She needed to demonstrate not just accuracy, but speed and adaptability. The third target, representing General Santos at the helicopter landing pad, was positioned at 1,800 meters and elevated to simulate the different geometry of that particular shot. This was the longest of the 3 shots and would require the most precise calculation of environmental factors. Morrison checked his watch. "Captain, in the real mission, you'll have approximately 4 minutes from the first shot to the last. The compound's security will be responding, and your window of opportunity will be closing fast." "Understood, sir," Sarah replied, already beginning her preparation for the rapid sequence. "I'm ready to demonstrate the full shot sequence." She positioned herself behind the rifle and began the mental process that every precision shooter develops over years of training and combat experience. The first step was breathing control, slowing her heart rate, and oxygenating her blood for maximum stability. Next came reading the environmental conditions, not just at her position, but attempting to predict wind patterns and thermal layers along the entire bullet path. The first shot in the sequence broke cleanly, and Sarah immediately began transitioning to the second target. She didn't wait to confirm the hit. In combat, hesitation meant death, and she trusted her training and equipment. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, adjusting the scope elevation and windage for the different target. Morrison watched through binoculars as the first bullet struck home at 1,600 meters. "Target 1 down," he announced. The second shot followed within 90 seconds, finding its mark at 1,700 meters with the same deadly precision. Sarah was already transitioning to the final target, the longest and most difficult shot of the sequence. "Target 2 down," Patterson called out, genuine surprise evident in his voice. The third shot was the most challenging. 1,800 meters through increasingly turbulent air, with wind patterns that had shifted slightly since the beginning of the sequence. Sarah made minute adjustments based on what she had observed during the first 2 shots, using that data to predict conditions at the longest range. The rifle bucked against her shoulder for the 3rd time, and they all waited for what felt like an eternity as the bullet traced its path through the morning air. At that distance, it was possible to actually see the bullet's trajectory if you knew where to look. "Target 3 down," Williams announced, his tone reflecting the amazement of a professional warrior witnessing exceptional skill. Morrison lowered his binoculars and looked at Sarah with new respect. 3 for 3 in under 4 minutes, with environmental conditions that were far from ideal. He paused, considering the implications. "Captain, that was the most impressive shooting demonstration I've seen in 20 years of special operations." Sarah cleared and secured her rifle before responding. "Sir, this was controlled range shooting with familiar equipment. The real mission will involve additional stressors, unfamiliar terrain, and the psychological pressure of knowing that lives depend on every shot." "Understood," Morrison replied. "But what you just demonstrated changes my assessment of this mission's feasibility. If you can maintain that level of accuracy under real-world conditions, we have a viable alternative to the direct assault." Chief Rodriguez stepped forward, his expression thoughtful. "Ma'am, I've got to ask, how do you account for all the variables at that distance? I mean, there are so many factors that can affect bullet trajectory." Sarah appreciated the question because it showed that these operators understood the complexity of what they were asking her to do. "Chief, extreme-range shooting is part science and part art. The science involves understanding ballistics, atmospheric physics, and environmental monitoring. The art comes from experience, intuition, and the ability to make split-second adjustments based on what you observe." She gestured toward the targets downrange. "Every shot teaches you something about the conditions. The way the first bullet behaves tells you about wind patterns and thermal layers that you can apply to the subsequent shots. It's like reading a language written in the air." Patterson nodded appreciatively. "That makes sense. It's similar to how we adapt tactics based on enemy response during an operation. Use early intelligence to inform later decisions." "Exactly," Sarah confirmed. "The key is building an accurate mental model of the environment and then trusting that model when you make the critical shots." Morrison was quiet for several minutes, processing what he had witnessed. His initial skepticism had been based on 20 years of experience that had taught him to be cautious about missions that depended on single points of failure, but Sarah's demonstration had shown capabilities that exceeded his expectations. "Captain," he finally said, "I'm authorizing the sniper option for Operation Thunderstrike, but I want additional contingencies in place. If something goes wrong, if conditions change, or if you determine that the shots aren't feasible, we abort immediately and go with the direct assault." "Agreed, sir," Sarah replied. "I'll make the determination based on real-time conditions and mission requirements." The next 3 days were spent in intensive preparation. Sarah studied satellite imagery of the target area, looking for environmental clues that might affect shooting conditions. She practiced with different ammunition types, tested backup equipment, and ran through contingency scenarios that might require rapid adaptation. Morrison's team prepared for both mission profiles. They rehearsed the direct assault option while also planning the support activities required for the sniper mission. Sarah would need protection during the long approach to the shooting position, communication support during the engagement, and rapid extraction afterward. On the evening before departure, Morrison found Sarah on the range conducting final equipment checks. She was methodically going through every component of her gear, testing and retesting each piece to ensure nothing would fail at the critical moment. "Nervous?" he asked, settling down beside her. "Focused," she replied. "Sir, I want you to know that I understand the responsibility you're placing on me. Your team's lives, the mission success, and the potential consequences of failure. I don't take any of that lightly." Morrison nodded. "I know you don't, Captain. What changed my mind wasn't just your shooting ability, though that's certainly impressive. It was watching how you approached the problem. You didn't try to convince me the mission was easy or guaranteed. You acknowledged the difficulties and then showed what was possible within those constraints." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sun set over the training facility. Tomorrow, they would board a military transport aircraft and begin the journey to a place that didn't officially exist, for a mission that would never appear in any public records. "Sir, can I ask you something?" Sarah said. "Go ahead. What made you doubt the feasibility initially? I mean, the distances were extreme, but within the realm of possibility for modern precision shooting." Morrison considered the question carefully. 20 years ago, when I was starting out in special operations, I watched a mission fail because we relied too heavily on one person's exceptional abilities. The sniper was highly skilled, probably one of the best in the military at that time. But when conditions changed unexpectedly, when the enemy adapted faster than we anticipated, that single point of failure became a catastrophe. He paused, remembering events that still influenced his decision-making decades later. 3 good operators died that day because we gambled on perfection instead of planning for reality. Since then, I've always favored approaches that don't depend on everything going exactly right. Sarah understood now why Morrison had been skeptical. It wasn't about her abilities or the technical feasibility of the shots. It was about the hard-learned wisdom of an experienced leader who had seen exceptional people fail under extraordinary pressure. "Sir, I can't promise that everything will go perfectly tomorrow," she said, "but I can promise that I'll make the best decisions possible with the information available and that I won't take unnecessary risks with your team's safety." Morrison stood up, satisfied with her answer. "Captain, that's all any of us can promise. Get some rest. Tomorrow we find out if the impossible is just another word for difficult." As Sarah packed her equipment for the final time, she thought about the 3 targets waiting in a compound halfway around the world. General Hassan, who had supplied weapons to terrorist organizations responsible for countless civilian deaths. General Petrov, whose betrayal of military secrets had compromised operations and endangered Allied forces. General Santos, whose mercenary army had destabilized entire regions and displaced hundreds of thousands of refugees. Tomorrow, weather permitting and with a little luck, she would ensure that their meeting was their last. The SEAL commander had declared that no one could hit targets at those ranges under those conditions. Sarah was about to prove that with the right preparation, equipment, and mindset, the impossible was simply another mission to complete. The helicopter touched down on the rocky ridgeline at 0345 hours, its rotors barely audible thanks to specialized noise-dampening modifications. Sarah and Morrison's team quickly unloaded their equipment and moved toward the concealed position that had been scouted by advance reconnaissance teams 2 days earlier. The mountain air was thin and cold at this altitude, nearly 8,000 feet above sea level. Sarah's breath formed small clouds as she carried her rifle case and supporting equipment across the uneven terrain. The shooting position was located on a rocky outcrop that provided excellent visibility of the target compound while offering natural concealment among the mountain's granite formations. Morrison led the way through the darkness, using night vision equipment to navigate the treacherous path. Behind him, Sarah moved with the quiet efficiency of someone accustomed to operating in hostile territory. The rest of the team spread out in defensive positions that would provide security during the mission while remaining close enough to support rapid extraction if things went wrong. The compound below lay in a valley that seemed almost peaceful in the pre-dawn darkness. Small lights marked the guard towers and main buildings, while thermal imaging revealed the heat signatures of sentries conducting routine patrols. Intelligence reports indicated that the 3 generals would begin arriving within the next few hours, with their meetings scheduled to commence at exactly 0800 local time. Sarah began setting up her shooting position with methodical precision. Every movement was deliberate and quiet, designed to avoid creating any disturbance that might alert enemy forces to their presence. She unfolded a specialized shooting mat that would provide stability while insulating her from the cold rock surface. The rifle emerged from its protective case like a precision instrument designed for this singular purpose. Sarah assembled the components with practiced hands, attaching the custom scope, adjusting the bipod legs for the exact height and angle required by the terrain, and loading the specially selected ammunition that had been tested and verified during training. Morrison positioned himself beside her with a powerful spotting scope that would allow him to observe the targets and provide real-time intelligence during the engagement. His role was crucial. He would confirm target identification, provide wind calls, and coordinate with the broader team if the situation changed unexpectedly. "Compound is approximately 1,800 meters downrange," Morrison whispered, his voice barely audible even in the mountain silence. "Wind appears calm, but we'll need to monitor conditions carefully as thermal layers develop with sunrise." Sarah nodded, settling into her shooting position and beginning the careful process of range estimation and environmental assessment. Through her scope, the compound appeared as a collection of buildings and structures that matched the satellite imagery she had studied extensively during mission preparation. The first critical step was confirming the exact distances to each target area. Using a laser rangefinder that was invisible to standard detection equipment, Sarah measured the precise range to each location where the generals would appear. General Hassan's balcony, 1,147 meters. General Petrov's courtyard meeting area, 1,792 meters. General Santos's helicopter landing pad, 1,823 meters. Ranges confirmed, she whispered to Morrison. All targets within the parameters we planned for. As the sky began to lighten with the approach of dawn, Sarah could see the compound with increasing clarity. The buildings were constructed of local stone and concrete, typical of the region's architecture. Guard towers positioned at strategic points provided overlapping fields of fire that would make a direct assault extremely dangerous for attacking forces. First vehicle approaching from the south, Morrison reported, watching through his spotting scope as a convoy of armored cars wound its way up the mountain road toward the compound. 3 vehicles, heavy escort. That's probably General Hassan arriving early. Sarah tracked the vehicles through her scope, noting their movement patterns and the security procedures being followed. Understanding how the enemy operated would be crucial if the situation developed beyond the planned engagement scenario. The convoy disappeared into the compound through heavily defended gates, and Sarah returned her attention to the specific areas where her targets would appear. The morning light was improving steadily, providing better visibility while also creating thermal layers in the atmosphere that would affect bullet trajectory. Wind picking up from the northwest, Morrison observed, watching small flags and vegetation around the compound. Estimate 8 to 10 knots, with gusting. Sarah made mental notes of the wind patterns, knowing that conditions could change significantly over the next few hours. At extreme ranges, wind was the most unpredictable variable, capable of turning a perfect shot into a complete miss. At 07:15, a second convoy arrived from the east. This one was smaller, but moved with the disciplined precision of professional military forces. Intelligence suggested this was General Petrov, whose background in Russian special forces made him particularly dangerous and security-conscious. Second target on sight, Morrison confirmed. Hassan and Petrov are both in the compound. Santos should arrive within the next 30 minutes. Sarah continued her preparation, checking and rechecking every aspect of her equipment and position. The rifle was perfectly zeroed, the scope adjustments were precise, and her shooting position offered the stability required for extreme-range precision shooting. At 07:42, the distinctive sound of helicopter rotors echoed through the mountain valley. A military transport helicopter approached from the southwest, circling the compound once before settling onto the designated landing pad. Sarah watched through her scope as several figures disembarked, led by a woman in military fatigues who matched the description of General Santos. All 3 targets are now on site, Morrison reported. Mission timeline is proceeding according to plan. Sarah felt her heart rate slow as she entered the focused mental state that every precision shooter develops through years of training and experience. Outside distractions faded away, leaving only the rifle, the targets, and the environmental conditions that would determine mission success or failure. At 800 hours, General Hassan appeared on the second-floor balcony of the main building, exactly as intelligence had predicted. He was accompanied by 2 bodyguards, but his position and movement patterns made him clearly identifiable through the high-powered scope. Target 1 is exposed and confirmed, Morrison whispered. Range 1,047 meters, wind from northwest at 9 knots. Sarah settled into her shooting position, controlling her breathing and feeling her heartbeat slow to the steady rhythm that indicated readiness to engage. The crosshairs of her scope settled on General Hassan's center mass, and she began the final calculations that would determine bullet placement. Wind speed, atmospheric pressure, temperature, humidity, and the Earth's rotation all factored into the shot placement. At this range, the bullet would be in flight for nearly 3 seconds, traveling through multiple layers of air with different characteristics. The trigger broke cleanly, and the rifle recoiled against Sarah's shoulder. Through the scope, she saw General Hassan suddenly collapse backward as the bullet found its mark with devastating precision. His bodyguards immediately began searching for the source of the attack, but the extreme range made their efforts futile. "Target 1 eliminated," Morrison confirmed. "Outstanding shot." Sarah was already transitioning to the second target, adjusting her scope for the different range and angle required to engage General Petrov in the compound's central courtyard. The sound of the first shot had alerted security forces, and she could see increased movement throughout the facility. General Petrov appeared in the courtyard area at 0803, following a schedule that seemed unaffected by the chaos beginning to develop around Hassan's position. His security team was focused on potential threats from ground level and had not yet identified the true source of danger. "Target 2 exposed," Morrison called. "Range 1,192 meters, wind steady at 9 knots with slight shift to north-northwest." Sarah made minute adjustments for the changed wind direction and different target geometry. This shot required slightly less elevation compensation due to the reduced range, but the angle was more challenging because of the target's position relative to her shooting location. The second shot fired with the same precise timing as the first. General Petrov dropped immediately, his security team's reaction delayed by confusion about what was happening and where the threat was coming from. "Target 2 eliminated," Morrison announced. 2 down, 1 to go. The compound was now in full alert status, with security forces taking defensive positions and searching for threats. However, the extreme range of Sarah's position kept her location concealed, and the guards were focusing their attention on potential ground-level attacks. General Santos had moved toward her helicopter, apparently intending to depart as soon as the security situation was resolved. This created both opportunity and urgency. She was exposed and vulnerable, but only for a limited time before she could escape. "Target 3 moving toward extraction point," Morrison warned. "You need to take the shot before she reaches the aircraft." Sarah transitioned to the third and final target, making rapid adjustments for range and wind conditions that had shifted slightly during the engagement sequence. This was the longest shot of the mission at 1,123 meters, and the target was moving toward cover. General Santos paused near the helicopter, speaking with her pilot and security team. For a few crucial seconds, she was stationary and clearly visible through Sarah's scope. "Target 3 exposed," Morrison called. "Range 1,823 meters, wind 9 to 11 knots from north-northwest, time factor critical." Sarah settled the crosshairs on target, accounting for the wind drift and bullet drop at the extended range. This shot represented the culmination of months of training, preparation, and the demonstration that had convinced Morrison to approve the sniper option. The third shot broke with the same controlled precision as the previous 2. Across the valley, General Santos collapsed near her helicopter, the bullet finding its mark, despite the extreme range and challenging conditions. "Target 3 eliminated," Morrison confirmed. "Mission accomplished. All 3 targets down." The compound erupted into chaos as security forces realized they were under attack from an unknown location. Vehicles raced between buildings, personnel took defensive positions, and helicopters began launching to search for the assault team. "Time to go," Morrison said, already beginning to pack up his spotting equipment. "Outstanding work, Captain." 3 for 3 under real-world conditions. Sarah quickly but carefully disassembled her rifle and packed her equipment. The extraction needed to be swift and efficient, as enemy forces would soon begin expanding their search pattern to include the surrounding mountains. As they moved away from the shooting position, Morrison spoke into his radio headset, coordinating with their extraction helicopter and providing mission updates to command authority. The operation had succeeded beyond expectations, with all three high-value targets eliminated and no friendly casualties. Razor Base. This is Razor 1, Morrison transmitted. Package delivered successfully. All objectives complete. Requesting immediate extraction. The response crackled through their communication systems. Razor 1, extraction inbound. Outstanding work. Mission success confirmed. As they reached the extraction point, Sarah reflected on the events of the past few hours. 3 shots, fired across distances that most people would consider impossible, had eliminated 3 dangerous individuals whose continued activities threatened regional stability and American interests. The helicopter appeared over the ridgeline precisely on schedule, its crew ready to extract the team and their equipment. As they loaded aboard, Morrison placed a hand on Sarah's shoulder. "Captain," he said, his voice carrying the respect of a professional warrior acknowledging exceptional skill. "I owe you an apology. When I said no one could hit those targets, I was wrong. What you accomplished today was nothing short of remarkable." Sarah secured her rifle case and settled into her seat as the helicopter lifted off. "Sir, it wasn't just my shooting. Your team's support, the intelligence preparation, and the mission planning all contributed to the success. This was a team effort." "Maybe so," Morrison replied. "But when it mattered most, when everything depended on 3 perfect shots under the worst possible conditions, you delivered. That's the mark of an exceptional operator." As they flew away from the target area, Sarah could see smoke rising from the compound where emergency response teams were dealing with the aftermath of the operation. 3 dangerous individuals who had seemed untouchable were gone, their networks disrupted, and their plans permanently derailed. The mission had proven something important to both Sarah and Morrison. Technical limitations that seemed insurmountable could be overcome with the right combination of skill, preparation, and determination. The phrase, "no one can hit that," had been transformed from a statement of impossibility into a challenge that had been met and exceeded. During the long flight back to base, Morrison's team members approached Sarah individually to express their appreciation and respect. Chief Rodriguez thanked her for making it possible to complete the mission without putting his team at risk. Williams admitted that he had doubted whether the shots were possible until seeing the results firsthand. Patterson praised her professionalism and the way she had handled the pressure of a mission where so much depended on individual performance. "Ma'am," Rodriguez said as they crossed international airspace, "I've got 3 kids at home who don't know that their dad came back safely today because of your shooting. But I know, and I'll never forget it." Sarah understood the significance of his words. The successful sniper mission had eliminated the need for a direct assault that could have resulted in casualties among Morrison's team. Professional operators like these men had families and futures that extended far beyond their military service. As they approached their home base, Morrison reviewed the mission reports that would be filed with higher command. The operation would be classified at the highest levels, and the details would remain known only to those with the appropriate clearances and need to know. "Captain Chen," Morrison said formally, "it has been an honor serving with you on this operation. Your exceptional performance under extreme conditions reflects the highest standards of military professionalism." "Thank you, sir," Sarah replied. "But I think we've proven something important today. When people say something is impossible, maybe they just haven't found the right person to attempt it yet." Morrison smiled, remembering his own words from just a few days earlier. "You're absolutely right, Captain. No one can hit that until someone does." The helicopter touched down at the home base as the sun was setting, completing a mission that had lasted less than 24 hours, but had required months of preparation and years of training to execute successfully. As they unloaded their equipment, Sarah realized that this operation would become a standard by which future extreme-range precision shooting missions would be measured. She had not just completed 3 impossible shots, She had redefined what was possible when everything depended on precision, preparation, and the willingness to attempt what others believed could not be done. The SEAL commander's declaration had become a prophecy that was both proven wrong and proven right. No one could hit those targets until someone did.